What's up, Chumbags? Welcome to the HQ. My name is Sri.
And my name's Alexa, and today we're going to be talking about Pushpa 2, The Rule.
Pushpa 2 is the 2024 sequel to the 2021 movie Pushpa, The Rise, and tells the story of the titular Pushpa. It's an action drama that stars Allu Arjun and is from director Sukumar, most popularly known, I think, for Rangasthalam,
Arya 1 and 2.
Arya 1 and 2, and had quite a filmography that includes Allu Arjun twice already, not including Pushpa, the first one, I mean. Mm-hmm. So this is their fourth film together, if my math adds up correctly.
Yep.
And it became a huge hit. Even though it came out in December of 2024, it became one of the highest grossing films in India that year, and one of the highest grossing films of all time from India, including a really fast run in terms of it became like the highest grossing film. They had 100 crores, 200 crores, 300
crores. Yeah, it was a constantly new post from their media team of like, oh, fastest at this one. Yeah,
just
and
like I think it landed somewhere around 1,800 crores earned at the international box office, which is makes it, again, probably top 3 highest grossing Indian films of all time. Now, with a movie this popular, what happens is the audiences get very polarized. Yeah. So it's, a lot of the conversation about this movie is either people saying, "Oh my God, I love it, and there's the best movie ever made," or it's like people are like, "How is this movie? Why did they make this movie?" Like,
how do people enjoy this?
Yeah, so it's one side or the other, and I think it's a pretty good way for us to start this reboot that we're doing with the reloaded version of Pushpa 2, because
this is basically this channel reloaded,
Yeah, exactly. And it's longer than just 20 minutes of content coming your way. But no, this is hopefully going to be a conversation where we balance the line. We're going to be very honest about what we think of the movie, but we're also going to talk about both sides. Yes. Some things where we really liked, and some things that we thought the movie may have stumbled a little bit. But again, this is just going to be us kind of, if we're being honest, fanboy girling over the movie. So yeah. Get ready for an extended conversation about Pushpa 2. Now, I think it's important to say that since the movie's been out for a few months now, and it's also available on Netflix with the extended cut, this is going to be a spoiler conversation. I would recommend watching the movie. I know it's an investment. It's 3 hours and 44 minutes total.
To watch the Reloaded, which is what we would recommend. We'll get into why as we talk.
I don't think there's a way to watch the...
is the rule not even available?
No, I don't think so, yeah.
I thought it was on a different one.
Nope. It's just the extended cut. Yeah, so I'd recommend watching the movie, because then you have everything, in context, and you can kind of participate in the conversation down in the comments while you watch. So, with that said, Alexa, I've done a lot of talking. Why don't you start by talking about your general thoughts on Pushpa 2, The Rule, not including Reloaded, just Pushpa 2.
I think Pushpa 2...
Because you have seen the movie 3 times.
Yes, twice just The Rule, once Reloaded. And so I really enjoyed it initially, just to kind of put that out there. The first time I watched it, I was like, yep, good. Now, that doesn't mean I thought it was perfect. There were definitely some things, like as we drove home, like some conversations that were had of key moments that just did not quite hit the mark. Like in the theatrical cut of the film, the opening sequence does not make sense why it's included. It has nothing to tie it in later on. I honestly thought it was going to be part of the teased Pushpa 3, The Rampage, that they had at the end, which was a cool reveal as well. I'm looking forward to that greatly whenever it comes out.
Which we'll talk about later, but...
Yeah, we'll talk more about. But that's what I thought, that was going to be a tie-in to that. And so it felt very out of place. The rest of the movie, I think, flowed well. There was definitely some characters who were a little less developed than we may have hoped of, specifically like Shekhavat's character, played by Fahad Fasil. I think that his character made sense in the theatrical cut, but there was definitely some stuff missing. Like, it felt like you didn't fully get how he got to where he was at the end of the film. It felt a little rushed, a little like, oh, okay, we're here now, bro. Like,
Sure.
But I still enjoyed it, and I still, you can find reasons for it in the plot that was given in the theatrical version. But the songs were great. I want to mention that one. We'll talk more about songs probably later, but just overall thoughts. And the performances were spectacular overall. Alu Arjun specifically, I mean, always he does a great job. But this movie, he really is playing a different role than we've seen from him most commonly in his previous ones, and he just becomes Pushpa. You're not watching Alu Arjun, you're watching Pushpa Raj.
Mm-hmm. Right. This is a very interesting movie for me because I've been a fan of Alu Arjun for a long time. This is a fun fact. When I first moved to America, for the first 2 years, I used to have the nickname Bunny because I liked the movie Bunny starring Alu Arjun so much. And so for me to see him kind of go from that to some of the performance, some of the particular moments in this movie where he really just shines. Those performances are so
drastically
drastically different.
Funny or happier, those early movies of his.
But it's so interesting and so cool to see him kind of develop as more of a dramatic actor. Not saying that he couldn't do this. Well, actually, I think that it was a phase. It kind of, you see the kind of the journey of okay, you're a young actor, so you're in these kind of more kind of light, breezy rom-coms and stuff like that, and then it gets more and more
But he did, I would say, early on show a glimpse at his ability of dramatic acting with the film Vedam that he was in.
Yeah,
great
movie.
Yeah, really good movie.
Yeah, but he doesn't get I think in a lot of the other films since then, though, he doesn't really get a lot of movies or moments where you can get really emotional or really dramatic and in this kind of way. So that being said, I think that him in this movie, in this role, was so fun to watch. And really, that brings us to kind of this movie in general, right? So Pushpa 1, The Rise, is the setup for, it's setting the stage. So it sets up this whole syndicate world around smuggling sandalwood out of this one particular part of India where the sandalwood grows, and how it has a big market outside of India. So it becomes a big thing that, you can make a lot of money on it. And so they set that stage up, and then they put up these really interesting characters, obviously like Pushpa, who kind of starts from the bottom at the start of the movie.
Starts as a coolie.
Yeah. And, you also have Mangalam Srinu and I'm forgetting all the characters,
Reddies.
Yes,
Reddy
Jatra
brothers.
Reddy, Jolly Reddy,
Kesava, Sirapa.
There you go. See, she's on top.
I'm on it.
That's what. Yeah. So it sets up all that,
And
and then and Srivali, and you have them all kind of playing now. They're all kind of doing their thing. So you're not setting it up as much. You're kind of trying
They're
to watch
in their roles now and
Yeah.
just living their life for this movie. I feel like.
Yeah. So now, with that, our general thoughts out of the way, hopefully we've convinced you to at least watch the movie now.
Fingers crossed.
We're going to be diving into the main story. We're just going to go through this kind of roller coaster of a ride that this movie is, and kind of talk through their general thoughts of the high points that we want to hit. So first of all, Alexo, you started talking about it, and that is the Japan sequence. What an interesting sequence. It's like a 15-minute sequence, I'd say.
Yeah.
I haven't timed it, but I'd say it's roughly feels that long. And it's kind of sets up it starts with a bang. You have to have some sort of a fight scene to get the audiences in. And right from the get-go, I have to say that this movie felt like it was doing the formula of Pushpa 1,
Yes.
but on a bigger scale. What I mean by that is, if you go through the plot beats of the movie, which again we're gonna go through, it hits the same kind of notes, just in a on a more dramatic
Turn it up.
yeah, exactly. Turn it up to 11, and you kind of let it ride. So yeah, the Japan sequence. What was your? And I mean, you seem to have some thoughts on it.
I mean, it's a cool sequence.
Sure.
The fight choreography of it. some silly moments in it, like him
Yeah.
running up the stairs
Just-
very much slower than the people running after him, but yet they never catch up to him.
Yeah.
You know, there's some, you know, believability that you have to just give
There's
some.
some suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, that's the phrase I was trying
Yep.
to remember. But
Yeah.
but if, you know, you allow yourself to have that, it's still in the fight choreography of it, like the way that they do it is
Yeah.
really cool. Like hanging him down, like, you know, all these fun moments that it has.
Yeah.
Like there are specific one-on-one fight sequence, you know, with a bit of the Japanese style of fighting mixed with Arjun style of fighting. The fact that he spoke Japanese
Yeah.
was crazy. I will
I
say
really like the gnarly kind of like slang version of Japanese. It was kind of cool to hear.
it was, and in his voice
Yeah.
was like very interesting. I will say though, watching it the first few times, is that it wasn't translated to English, the Japan
sure.
parts of it in the subtitles, so I had no clue what was being said. I just heard Alu Arjun and these other characters speaking in Japanese, and I just was like, wow, they sound cool. Like,
Sure, yeah. No, that whole sequence was like, it was cool introduction, but it really felt out of place. Especially because, you know, HR's coming in. Obviously, got to do the due diligence, make sure.
Gotta make sure we're being good.
So that sequence feels like it doesn't really make sense, and I felt that in the first watch of the movie, which again I also did the same thing. I watched the regular version of The Rule twice, and then I watched the Reloaded once entirely, and then I kind of skipped around a little bit just before this discussion here, and I felt like in the first time I was like, okay, the Japan sequence happens, and then the movie actually starts. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, the movie. There's such little context you get for the Japan sequence that if you cut out that Japan sequence and the movie starts with like him like having a nightmare about drowning as a kid and then waking up, and then his actual first intro is actually after the villain intro. Like, so, you know, Shekavatsar's like intro.
Great intro to Shekava. I gotta say, that reveal of him behind the two people
where he's just
talking about him,
and then like,
so
you know, it turns
good.
around. It's a cool.
I loved that moment.
And so, yeah, like that. And then the first reveal of the actual main hero is after that. Would have been so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, even when we watched the Reloaded version, you literally were saying at the start, you're like,
saying,
in my canon, it starts here,
you
like after the
it.
Japan sequence.
Yeah,
and I was like, yeah, you're right, that flows a lot better.
Except we're gonna get to that later.
In the second half, post intermission in Reloaded version.
Yes, exactly.
Changes it a lot.
Now, after that, I think that, you know, one of the things that this movie does really well, that we also have to understand that this is a Moss movie, right?
Yes.
And so it's definitely has like, you know, it's there to entertain. It has to have a little bit of everything. But I really appreciate how there's some depth to some of the kind of writing and actions. For me, I think the scene right after that, which is the jail scene where Pushpa goes to get one of the guys who works for him because he's getting married that day.
Who has some of the opening dialogue in our version of the theatrical cut of the film.
Yes, yeah. That scene establishes this, how much the people that work for Pushpa care for him.
Yes.
And how much Pushpa kind of cares for his people.
Yes.
Because then in that scene, it's a rabbit hole, kind of goes deeper. So, you know, it starts with like, he's just there for that one guy. Then he realizes that they were hit. And so then he's like, I want all of them. And then he buys the entire station.
Yeah.
And so like it's like an escalation that I think ultimately serves the purpose of character elevation. Because that's what a Moss movie is. It's sequences where the main character has to be, you know, like, oh, he's cool. Like, he's not just cool. He's really cool. And, you know, he's not just really cool. He's super cool, you know?
Yeah. It is like these moments.
Yeah. But it does that while establishing that the characters care about each other. There's feelings, you know, stuff like that. And that's something this movie does really well.
I think it does. This sequence, that opening, you know, moment with him showcases how far he's come and how well he stayed true to his roots in one moment, which are the two of the most key aspects of his character. Is he is now rich, ahead of it all, but he still remembers when he was a coolie. He still respects the people who work for him, all the hard work that they put into it,
right?
You know, and I think that both of those things are just such key elements of his character, and this opening sequence does an amazing job setting that up for the rest of this second film. Yeah.
And, you know, moving on from through the narrative, we have actually after that sequence, is at the title card. And I really do love the trend of like movies just like having really long openings, like like RR does this too, like 40-minute sequence.
RR
then,
takes it a little advanced, I'll say.
but like 40 minutes into the movie, you're like, oh, the title card dropped. We're watching the movie. I forgot. And so I do appreciate that. But then the title card drops, and then the movie kind of settles down a little bit, and it the kind of the elevating is takes a backseat for a little bit, and you have more kind of the setup for the specific Srivali, Pushpa's wife, wants a photo with the CM, and Pushpa
Chief
cannot
Minister.
And or the central minister. I don't know. I don't know.
Now I'm like, and I mess it up. I was trying to help, and I may have made it worse.
No. I don't know the politics. I'm not gonna comment on that. But
I think you're right.
It's okay. So she wants a photo, and Pushpa goes there. He gets rejected, and there's there's a moment where he pretty much says the point of the movie directly to the camera, which is I wasn't upset that he said no to the photo. I was upset because what he said about my wife, and he said, "I'll show him what happens when a man listens to his wife's word." Or like, that's the English translation of
right.
Of it,
and
that sets the stage for this entire kind of so with that, he's like, okay, I'm gonna make this guy next to me,
Siddhapa.
I'm gonna make him the CM. And so he's like, okay, I gotta get you the money, and to get you the money, I gotta smuggle a lot of sandalwood out of the country, and that's what he has to do. And so he arranges a deal with his broker, who it's like this, a ridiculous amount of sandalwood that they're smuggling out.
Meets with the guy from Dubai.
Yes, and then buys the helicopter, which is becomes like a pivotal.
And then the guy is like, "My dog won't even sit in this car." His dog goes into it. Yeah. I love that moment.
And there's actually, with that, speaking of, there's actually certain things that are established in the first part of the movie, and this is a trend that I've seen in some other recent movies as well. Like Game Changer does this as well, which is establishing certain dialogues or phrases that they kind of reoccur.
Yeah.
In this one, there's exactly. In Game Changer, there's dope. In this one, there's a few. There's peelings or feelings. The slang version of feelings.
Yeah.
Which obviously has its own song, but then it's referenced a few times. Kind of established this kind of
with their relationship.
Yeah.
Their relationship in this, I think that was one of our comments when we rewatched the first movie, was their relationship didn't feel fully developed.
Yeah, exactly.
But this movie, I fell in love with their relationship. The way that they interact with each other. They're such a cute little married couple. Like, their love and respect that they have for each other is so wonderful. Like in the kitchen sequence, when he calls her curry too salty and stuff, and then she hurts her toe. Like, that whole interaction is just wonderful.
Yeah, I think that, their relationship in the first one, I wasn't a huge fan of either. I think it was one of the points where I felt like the movie kind of rushed along. Yeah. But this is one of the weird cases where I actually feel...
reloaded version of The Rise.
I don't know about that. But it's one of the few instances where I feel like the sequel really developed the first one as well, or enhanced the first one. I don't think the first one's flawless either. Like, I don't think it's like necessarily like, oh, I accept it better, but it's more like, that's how it started, and then it kind of blossoms into what it is here. I appreciate that a little bit more. But yeah, I thought their kind of relationship was very organic in the way that, like, it would make sense for this, like, in this, for this smuggler and, like, this particular scenario that they've set up. I think their dynamic works really well, and leads them to what we're going to talk about at the very end of this discussion as well, because Alexa has some stuff to say about that. But along with feelings, there's also Kisik, which is the camera sound that's established right away at the photos, and they keep going back to it until the second half of the movie, where there's a party song with that whole word as the
which, again, the party song. I love how they did it with the wife, because like
sure.
was the second it started a little, I was like a little disappointed, because I was like, like, are they gonna do like, you know, a regular item song? They've just developed how much he loves his wife, but no, they did it in a really nice way where it kept like cutting to her and them like exchanging looks, and she's almost like mimicking the dance move that they're doing together, you know.
Yeah.
And she even comes up and dances with them at one point. And rewatch that sequence if you haven't, and only watch Alu Arjun, because if you watch him during that sequence, his performance there fully sells how much that man loves his wife. Like how much Pushpa Raj loves Rivali is really sold in his acting in that moment of that scene.
Yeah, yeah, it's very sweet.
It's very sweet,
and it's so interesting because, again, they're doing this within the context of the story. Like it's still like, you know, the like everything is happening for the same purpose, right? Like Pushpa is the center of the focus. Like you like he is always the most important thing on the screen, you know?
Right, always.
And each sequence, no matter kind of what else it's doing, right? Because some scenes are like more of, you know, Srivali, or one like maybe another like Fahad Fasil character. I don't want to say his name; it's too complicated at this point.
Shikavat.
Well, I don't want to say the whole name. I feel like I need to start with Banawar and then like, you know, sing
say
Shakavat,
everyone's.
But, yeah. But anyway, I digress. No, you know, they go one way or another, but they always kind of come back and they center on Allu Arjun's character and his performance there. So, okay, so anyway, we push past that. There's kind of the first half of the movie has its own kind of conflict and resolution, right? Because it's such a long movie. What happens in the first half is essentially the minister goes to Shakawat and says, "Hey, like, what can I do to get you to chill the fuck out?" You know, and so there's an interesting exchange that they have. You know, they bear it all, let's say, and have an open open conversation.
Ollie disagrees with this opinion a lot.
Anyway, the first half, the minister essentially says, to appease you, I will get Pushpa to apologize, and that sets up the big conflict for the first half, to end the first half of the movie. And so there's a party sequence that's literally the whole party is just so people can come listen to Pushpa apologize to Shakawat. And so,
which I love the pettiness of that, like just for a moment of like it, that really exemplifies Shakavat's character. Yeah, you know, and
well, I think that go ahead.
The pride of it, you know, because everyone was making fun of him. Like even when he, you know, the opening sequence, they were all laughing at him when he is pretending to be a coolie, and so it shows how much he's like, you know, his pride. Yeah, and so he's like, all right, everyone knows about how you embarrassed me. Everyone's going to know about how you apologize to me.
Yeah. And so, one thing that this movie does really well, especially in the reloaded version with kind of more added dialogue and stuff, is it kind of has some throwaway lines that I feel like add a lot of depth to the character. And so in the sequence you're talking about with, you know, where the party sequence where he's his whole pettiness of it, at the start of that sequence, he says something along the lines of like, you know, last time I waited this long to hear someone say something to me, it was like this girl, I waited like so long for like her to say I love you or whatever. I thought like that moment, like the establishing that small thing kind of sets up like, oh yeah, this is him, like
this is his
like,
character,
and it also shows how important this moment is to him, you know. And so stuff like that I thought was interesting, just like one-off lines. I don't know if it was like a character choice from, you know, Fahad Fasil, or if it was like a director, like, you know, he wrote it in the script.
Sukumar's good at writing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and so, but whatever happened to get there, seeing it on the screen, it adds like a little bit of impact here and there that works really well. So Pushpa shows up, drunk, you know,
so drunk,
full on goat meat, I think, and he surprisingly apologizes. After apologizing, Pushpa kind of quickly makes an exit, and then this begins this really dramatic sequence in the car. And I have to say, before we get into the actual what happens in the car, which is I think pretty interesting, and like kind of the performances are really cool, but there's a small interesting hiccup in this scene, and it's right at the start of the scene, like as the camera is pushing in on the car. Of them talking, driving away from the party. There's if you it's only for like a few seconds, but essentially you can see the CGI car on top of the real kind of car that they shoot it on, and so there's like double windshield wipers on the on the screen.
Yeah.
It's again very brief.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff kind of reminds me that, first of all, this movie's not perfect. I'm not going to say it's a perfect
We give
movie.
me a lot of compliments.
Yeah,
because we do
yes.
really like the movie. There's a lot of great things to say.
Both
perfect.
the first movie and this one have those weird like little thing. Like in the first movie, there's this one sequence always sticks in my mind. It's when right after they have the when Pushpa and Shekhawat bear it all at the end of the first movie. Pushpa like gets on a bike and is driving away, and Shekhawat is like points his gun at him, and the camera follows. But if you watch the bike's shadow as it drives away, it like starts like fizzing out, and you can see like the little like drop shadow kind of effect, oval effect on it, and then it's like kind of janky a little bit there. And that's the same thing kind of reminds me of here. Obviously this is a much a higher scale.
That was one of the big things that I kind of thought about for this, referring back to the first movie, is the CGI on the sandalwood.
Oh yeah.
Because like there's that one sequence where the sandalwood's all flowing through the water, which they had some cool callback to that as well, with the way that they transported some sandalwood in this movie. But the CGI on it was rough in the first movie, if we're being bluntly honest about it. And they really stepped it up.
Even the practical effects.
Even the practical like foam ones. And the foam ones in this were still, not fully the best, but they were definitely a step up from that first movie.
Yeah.
And overall, I would say the effects were, again, everything's turned up a little bit.
Yeah.
Even the quality of the CGI and effects that were throughout the film. Still some blips, but overall, better.
Yeah. Getting back to the car, Pushpa has this sort of monologue where he uses Kesava as a bounce board. And I think that brings us to actually talking about Kesava, because he is a very important character in this movie, and he adds a lot of depth with the relationship him and Pushpa have. And sometimes it's dialogue, like when at the start of the movie he's it's like, oh, okay boys, you can have your breakfast, we have some time, and how he makes the phone call saying, hey, we're going to be late 30 minutes,
right?
To also just like there's certain sequences where there's just insert shots of his reactions, like he doesn't have dialogue, he's just reacting like to what Pushpa's saying. And that kind of stuff adds so much to the what Pushpa means to Kesava and Kesava means to Pushpa. And I really enjoyed kind of seeing that. And even here in this sequence, it happens right at the end of when the car drift happens. Which, by the way, really this movie has two really nice car peel outs, or not peel outs, the opposite of peel outs. Car stops.
Yeah.
But anyway, right after the sequence, Kesava, says, "Hey, yeah, like I thought he was going to turn around earlier." Actually, that was.
Yeah, no, and that whole sequence, like how much Kesava's opinion means to Pushpa as well.
Right.
But I think one of the things that really makes Kesava's performance, like his character, so pivotal is, and we have to mention, is just the actor's performance as it, like being able to have those reaction shots that add so much to the story really showcases just a phenomenal job from him. Like I am blanking on his name right now, but he just, every time his face is on screen, whether he's in the background, he's a shot of him, like no matter what he's doing, his character's reactions make sense for the scene.
Yeah. And
that is really, just really impressive. It doesn't even make sense for the scene, like not only make sense for the scene, but it also adds to the scene.
Right.
But one key thing also about his character that I think we need to mention is in the first movie, he was kind of the narrator of it, like where he was talking about Pushpa's rise to fame. And this movie kind of abandons that narration and just focuses on being like a story. Yeah. Like a typical movie, rather, if you will. And I think that was an interesting choice to have. I'm not quite sure why they chose to not continue the narration style. I think that it would have also worked, because it's not like it was all throughout. It was just kind of key moments of it. He would come in and give some, overall narration on top of what was happening. So it's interesting that they chose to not continue that. And I wonder if it'll come back in part 3 or not.
Yeah, I think probably has to do with the way the movie ends. I don't know how you'd narrate that ending. You know what I mean? But again, we'll talk about that in a second. Maybe not a second with the way we're going.
Yeah, I think we're talking a lot.
So Pushpa is like, I shouldn't have apologized. Turns the car around, goes back, and then there's the pool scene, which
the ultimate disrespect.
which has like a lot of implications. There's a lot going on.
Gets
with,
undressed again.
Yes, yeah. But ultimately, the kind of intermission banger is Pushpa challenging Shekhawat to stop his sandalwood export from leaving the state.
Yes.
And he gives him the time and date and says, I'm moving this much sandalwood out. Let's see if you can stop me.
And if you catch even a single log, I'll throw my axe over my shoulder and go back to the forest as a coolie.
Alexa got it. Alexa nailed it.
It's a great scene.
And then the actual intermission shot is him looking at himself in the rearview mirror and saying, "Yeah, now I look right. That this looks right." Which again, I just really love the kind of how in depth to Pushpa's ego and kind of just like personality they get. Like the whole movie is propelled by the fact that Pushpa is like, I have to be this guy. Like I am that guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's the whole buildup. But we're only halfway through, and the biggest changes with the movie are actually in the second half. So we're gonna get to that. But first,
quick word from our sponsor.
They hit me with their
Austin down,
car.
Austin down, Austin down.
Oh my god, it's taking so long. I'm going on.
All right, Austin. We might be losing this target.
Sri, stay on him. I'll pick up Austin.
Okay. All right, fine. No, I can't get in.
Just somebody heal me.
I can't.
Why did you get out the car? Why didn't you keep following him? Sri was already out the car.
Oh my god. Sri! Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
I'm down. I'm down.
Jesus
What was that,
Christ,
Sri?
folks.
That was because
What was that?
That was teamwork is what that was, look.
So then the second part, jumps right into it with immediately we're getting the payoff of that challenge from Pushpa where the police are all coming in together to try and stop. They've blocked all of the paths between the states. They are doing everything in their power to make sure this sandalwood does not cross the straight line. Shekhawat is saying, this is it. I'm beating Pushpa in this moment. Yeah. Surprise. He does not.
No. And, this... I think really brings us, we don't have to go beat by beat, but I think this really brings us to why the Reloaded version is the best version of this movie.
Yes.
Because honestly, when they said the Reloaded version, I fully honesty, okay, I'm being honest here, Alexa, you can't see I'm not honest. I thought it was just going to be a bunch of like other moss scenes or like random elevation stuff that they cut out, maybe even more slow-mo. I wasn't expecting it to be significant, but after watching the Reloaded version, there are, and we're going to go through the sequences. These sequences feel like I don't know how you cut this from the movie, other than maybe because like the movie's 3 hours and 44 minutes with the whole runtime.
Yeah, it makes it from just a little over 3 to nearly 4 hours, which is a big difference when you're trying to sell a movie to an audience. Yeah, and
also kind of changes. You have to, if we're talking about business, it also changes the amount of shows a movie theater can have in a given day. Yeah. So because you have to include like cleanup time and all that stuff, going into it. So.
Yeah, so I see why they cut it for, practical reasons like that. But for the story, they really did an injustice, I think, cutting any of that stuff out. All of it added to a character or added to a moment in, to reuse your word, significant ways. Yeah. And like specifically Shekhawat's character, one of the big complaints that I think we saw online and, didn't disagree with was that Shekhawat's character just like went off the rails really fast. Like he just continued, like, he
has
goes
a kind
crazy.
of a Joker arc almost.
Yeah. And it didn't feel, super justified in the theatrical cut. Yeah. But this cut of the movie with the Reloaded version, there are so many details about how much effort he put into stopping Pushpa that it makes a lot more sense how he would end up in that mental state. Yeah.
And so, this brings us to like, Shekhawat is the reason why Pushpa has to go to Japan. Yeah. Because, this
sequence is the craziest one that they were
because watching this movie, it is honestly like shocking how many times I was like, oh my gosh, like this changes things. Like
we were like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
So the most significant thing is that there's 2 characters' deaths, which is Jatra Reddy dead in a car scene, in a car
Didn't
crash.
know he was dead in the theatrical
and also and it's so much of
guy.
it or that, but there's so much that has to be cut because of other sequences that were cut, and stuff like that. So for example, to lead up to what conversation we're gonna have, right after the Jatra sequence, which we're gonna get to.
Yes.
There's this sequence on with a boardroom where, like, with the syndicate is meeting, and they essentially decide that in that sequence, Pushpa kind of asserts his rule, and it says if I say this shirt is red, then you this is a red shirt, and it's like supposed to be like this idea of like how much like business is about trust. And so he says, like, I want you guys to trust me, and that's how I do business. And so they all decide, on his decision, that Jatra Reddy will be the one to go and check that the product is where Pushpa says it is. And that,
or that it is somewhere, because he won't tell them where it is.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that then leads into the sequence where Jatra Reddy is confirming the stuff, and in the original cut, he's there, right? If I remember, I believe he is there.
But kind of off of that, though, then how Shekhavat comes to be where he is to find stuff is because, like Pushpa thought, someone in the room in the syndicate meeting then leaked to Shekhavat the fact that Jatra Reddy was going to be the one there. And so Shekhavat had a tail on Jatra Reddy. And then they followed him and kept him updated. And that's how he was able to be on that dock. And they did, find the sandalwood underneath the boats.
Right,
but the reason that they were there, Shekhavat has this whole plan that he's done. Like, he has people inside. Like, he has put in so much thought and effort into catching the sandalwood and stopping Pushpa. And all of that's gone in the theatrical version of it. Yeah.
And because, like, he does catch the sandalwood, and he has like a moment of victory, and then it turns out he's not. It's not. It's a fake sandalwood. That's not the real stuff. And so there's that whole sequence there that we're kind of
earlier on. We were skipping around a little
because it's going beat by beat. I mean, we will be this will be reloaded.
This will be 4 hours.
Yeah. But so the kind of conversation we're heading towards was, we see how both sides are kind of meeting at the dock, where the searching is happening for the sandalwood, and in that sequence at the end of it, Jatra Reddy and the Dubai broker person are both in a car crash, trying to escape the police. Jatra Reddy is dead on the spot, and the other guy is still alive. And then once again, Shekhavat is like, okay, he's an active antagonist, so he's interrogating this guy, and he's like, oh, no one knows the name of the person that is paying Pushpa besides him. So he's like, Shekhavat kills him, and it's almost the same effect.
He doesn't kill him, to be clear. Actually,
yes, you are right. Yeah, because
it is also again a showing of his character and who he is.
He incentivizes his right hand man to do it. But I think it kind of reflects actually what you had said about how in the during the syndicate meeting, Pushpa's like, I can't trust any of you because it'll leak, and it's similar to that where. Shekhavat is like, I can't trust any of you guys. You guys get bought out. He's like, I can't trust you. So he kills him and said no one's gonna know who the person is. And
Good luck getting your money.
So that leads us to hit Pushpa going to Japan. And
which sounds like a joke, like side movie. Pushpa goes to Japan. It's like Paddington goes to Peru coming out
exactly.
this year.
But that sequence, first of all, made me take back what I said, because. The opening of the movie now makes sense.
And now, it makes sense. That's really
it gives context.
It has meaning.
Yeah, and also, again, it's similar to how in the first movie, again, the way I said the pattern of the movies are the same. It's halfway through Pushpa 1, you realize that the fight scene from the start of the movie happens, and then we go back to the regular story.
And that's what this is now.
And that's become the same thing here. And so it is a really you get a little bit of an extension on the fight sequence from the opening of the movie, and then there's this really cool scene in Japan where I don't know if they actually went to Japan, but that takes place in Japan.
Set there.
That's set there. where he actually sees the sandalwood violin that is from the opening of the first
animation
movie.
of the first movie, which I really liked that callback.
Yeah, it was a cool way to tie it together, and also kind of experiencing. Pushpa experiencing Japan was an interesting thing.
Not what you'd expect, especially like if you think back to the first movie when he's squatting, just and then you're like, this guy, he's gonna be in Japan, being dined by a billionaire in Japan.
Yeah,
like...
and so at the end of that sequence, he's like, okay, he's asking for like a signature or something like that. And Pushpa, after being hurt, is like, so I was like, oh, I'll give you my signature. And so he gets the blood from his wound, and then he smacks a tablecloth, which has his red handprint on it. And then we cut to the red handprint on the trucks that are bringing in the money. In the original cut, the trucks just arrive. Like there's no
like money.
Yeah, you don't have. I don't think there's really any establishing context for that.
Well, because Dubai guy just makes it happen is what it is in the theatrical cut. Nothing. There's no obstacle.
And so here Shekhawat is doing that kind of antagonizing a little bit more actively.
Yeah, I like your word of he's like an active antagonist, because that's I think the biggest difference of his character from theatrical to Reloaded is that he goes from a passive to an active antagonist. I think that really is the key phrasing of the significant change of his character.
Yeah. Now, because of Jaka Reddy's death, we also get a scene with Jolly Reddy.
Yes.
And it's, again, a scene I was totally not expecting.
No.
And it also makes sense why he limps his way into the end of the movie a little bit more. But this is a scene where essentially Pushpa's like, hey, I will put past behind us. I am willing, because of what happened, because I'm more or less the reason why both your brothers are dead.
Right.
He did not actually kill them, though, let's say.
No, but he said but he takes the blame for it.
Right. No, absolutely. And so here, he's like, I'm offering you the chance. We can get into business if you want, or you can kill me. And Jolly Reddy goes to kill him.
Right.
Fails, misses, doesn't hit.
Slips because of his injuries from Pushpa.
from Pushpa. And
well-earned injuries, I will say.
Yeah, and I think that they, the way he's like, okay, now I understand you're a man or whatever, and he leaves with the money.
Takes the couch, yeah. Which the couch of money, we did gloss over that. I love that he delivers everyone money in the cushions of couches. That sequence to me was so like, that's spectacular.
Yeah. You know what? With the way we're talking about this movie, they're gonna think that's what these are. Like, oh yeah, they sent it.
these are
these
full
over.
of cash.
They sent these so we can talk about Pushpa.
Yeah, just to say how much we love it.
The couch of cash we'll get to again, because it'll be at the end. But yeah, so that gives a little bit of context with Jolly Reddy for why he's in at the end.
I will say in the theatrical cut, him just walking in was also a cool moment.
Oh, like
with
it was
no
a cool
context.
Moment, but it's just like
now it's a more meaningful moment.
Like, I remember him.
So it was kind of like it was like because that final sequence we'll talk about more is like a gathering of villains, and then so
the
it was
Doom.
cool. Like even he's back, and then while it has more meaning in the Reloaded version, it still was like a cool moment without the context in the theatrical cut.
Right. Now, last thing I'll say with kind of with regarding how this Reloaded cut improves Shekhawat is he also has one more thing that he does. That's two more things that he does that are kind of active. One is he actually asks for the minister, the current CM's meeting
before Zarapa.
So that they could essentially like warn him and get permission to then go to the dock, that we were talking about earlier. And then there's also a scene where someone is coming to verify, I forget who, but they're coming to verify that the sandalwood they got is really sandalwood. And so they bring in real sandalwood and they put it into
Sunil and his wife bring it in for
Sunil
his character. What's his character's name?
Mangalam Sinu.
Oh, he's back. He's back.
You're breaking the rules. So he brings in the real sandalwood and places it in specific spots so that when they test it, it comes out as like legit. So even that stuff, it shows he's a little bit more cunning. He's a lot smarter. Right. And he's also got that same ego thing going on that's kind of pushing pushing them at each other. And I think, in the battle of egos, it's just a Pushpa's is the biggest.
Yeah.
That's really what the movie.
Yeah, they are very similar characters.
Yes,
in many ways, which I really like their dance, and then that's what makes why I was okay with it in the theatrical cut, because like I'm like, oh, okay, even though we don't see much take a lot, it's like they're kind of neck and neck, but then one's constantly failing, one's constantly succeeding. But then having this now, it really shows like they're both really smart at what they do. They both put in a lot of thought. They have great ideas. It's just that Pushpa's better.
Yeah. Now let's go back a little bit to the sequence that really, it's like a 20-minute sequence in itself, and I think it's probably one of the highlights of the movie, at least for me, and that's the Jatra sequence, otherwise known as the fair. I think it's kind of the translation that they use.
The big festival scene.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So this is such an interesting and I want to say bold kind of organization of scenes, because it's one seemingly large set that has both a dramatic reveal of a character's there's a character revelation in this, like, that starts this sequence. Then it goes into a song that's not just like a song that's like a light song. It's a very
character reveal. We're talking spoilers. She's pregnant.
Okay,
Srivali's
sure.
pregnant.
Right,
Right,
yes.
That's key to, I think, other stuff we'll talk about.
Stuff, yeah, sure. No spoilers. We would get the revelation that Srivali's pregnant. And then there's the Gango Renuka Talli song. I was just gonna
say that.
I was gonna remember what I was trying to remember what it was. I believe I said that right though. And which is like this really crazy. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't even know that song was in the movie. Because I'd only seen like the main big songs, and so seeing that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, it kind of it was a very intense dance. Not like a typical thing.
No blinking.
Right after that, no blinking. Then right after that, you have another song, which is undercuts that a little bit, because it's then like the song about Srivali and her relationship with her husband, or how she understands him. Which again, I think is a song with a lot of. I really appreciate how much that song adds. Like, it's not just a song that's like
I love him. He's so handsome. He's so strong.
Right, like the fact that she's like, he's doing all these things around town, but he has to ask me like to find my his shirt, or, like like small stuff like that shows kind of their dynamic, like the version of Pushpa that only Srivali knows. That kind of thing I thought was really cute. And then. We're not
and
done
maybe
yet.
Kessava knows too, but if we're being honest, his other romance.
That's true. And then
bromance, if you will.
It goes into which during that second song sequence, you get a little tease of another antagonist.
Yes.
And then there's an actual fight scene with that antagonist. So that's the fourth thing that happens in this one set. And after this whole kick-ass fight scene with Pushpa and this sari and like this whole the blue skin,
rocks the sari.
Yeah, just. Like a really just bombastic fight scene, and really colorful. Like, I love the colors in this sequence. I think that to briefly touch on colors, the cinematography in this movie is really really cool.
Yes,
and there's certain sequences that like are like almost like it's like hyper realistic sequences that like add a lot. Like they're these frames that I think capture really well. I think the Jatra sequence has a lot of them. And there's also the funeral sequence for the guy who falls off the bridge, where like it's like a sunset with the umbrellas and it's raining and like the car comes in.
He jumped off because he was scared.
Right, exactly. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Like stuff like that. I think Kubo is like has a really cool lensing. And yeah, I also think that kind of going off of the cinematography here, it's so interesting to me watching it so many times now. It's one of the reasons why I love rewatching certain movies. It's interesting to me how much of this movie is surprisingly not like in one shot. Like, I'm not saying it's a one take. Okay. There's different things. I'm saying in one shot, multiple things happen.
Yes.
And, I really like the way that that kind of fleshes out some certain scenes. It's not just like a shot, reverse shot, which is kind of a typical.
And even when it'll cut sometimes between scenes and stuff, like, when this villain comes back in the final big fight scene and stuff, like there's this really nice shot where it is cutting between, but you can tell that one of the shots that it cuts to a bunch of times, it looks like it was a one take.
Right, yeah.
And
where
then
he's
they
like
added in some insert shots. Exactly. Well, the dog.
The dog isn't cut, yeah.
The dog was cut from the theatrical version. I'm really upset about this trend. So 2 movies in 2024 had a dog and cut it from the theatrical cut. Very upset about this.
Yeah.
Twisters is the other one, if you're wondering.
so going back to the Jatra sequence, we have, all of this stuff happening back to back to back to back, making it almost like
and then there's even a monologue to end it off.
I was going to say, and then, we have Srivali's monologue, which is just, again, kind of ties in one take, or again, one shot, not one take. I don't know if she did in one take. She could have.
I'm sure it was multiple.
but it was one shot where she's delivering this whole dialogue sequence. You cut back and forth, and, there's a lot of staging going on, and I really appreciated that, when there's certain sequences where the camera will pull back during her monologue and it'll show Pushpa taking off his nose ring or something, and then she says something about, oh, my husband was crying because of what you're doing or saying or whatever, and then the mom reacts to Pushpa, and it's like almost like an off frame action, but it keeps the frame lively during that whole sequence, and so stuff like that. For me, watching it and rewatching it, it's been really interesting, and I really appreciate those kind of small acting moments that are kind of.
And Rashmika killed it too.
Yes,
she did
very
a
good
really great job all throughout, but especially that monologue is obviously kind of, I think, her shining moment in the movie.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And she does, like, the emotion she goes through, and then at the very end of it of like, well, honey, can we leave? Like, it's very like, Swami, can we leave? Like, it's very well done. It makes you fully like her character, you know what I mean? Because as we said, her character was a little bit weak in the first movie. Yeah,
because it's actually, essentially in the first movie you find out that it's her love, like she loves him, and like the whole time, like that was the twist of the romance in the first one.
Yeah, but you don't see it at all,
right?
And in this one you fully get to see why she loves him.
Yeah,
and it's expressed in songs as well as in that monologue is really the culmination of it all.
Yeah. And so the Jatra sequence, I know, and I totally understand that if some people might feel that it's one or more of that sequence feels off. Like, if someone said that the second song was like, oh, and like Suseki, I actually think that it could have been maybe a little bit more impactful of a song if it had visuals to go with the lyrics. Because like what she's saying, if you saw what she was saying.
Oh, like
visually,
if it cut too.
Right. But again, it would change the way that this sequence works. I think the Jatra sequence by itself is such an interesting,
it's like a little short film.
Yeah, that's yeah, exactly. That like I appreciate that it sits within its own kind of context.
Yeah, I do have to slightly disagree with you there, where I don't think it would have been better if it cut to the
I'm
things
not saying I'm saying that I can understand.
I disagree with this point that you have made very clear.
And so if that, or if maybe the fight scene like right after that, or the stuff like that, I could see why some people might find it a little bit off. But for me, I think the Jatra sequence, by and large, again, I said it's like breathless. You kind of just
it just goes through.
You're just like, oh, we're in, and then it's like 20 minutes later, like, oh, we're out. Like, it's a cool sequence throughout.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, that brings us to again, keeping with the way this movie is similar in scheme and pattern to the first one. Just like how at the last act of Pushpa the Rise, we get introduced to Shakabat, and he's like this new antagonist. In this one, at the end of the Jatra sequence, you have this new bad guy introduced, and then he comes back at the last act of the Rule, where he comes in and he kidnaps Pushpa's niece, who's kind of a reoccurring character throughout throughout the movie, and he's kidnapped her, and she's missing, and we're into the last act of the movie. We're barreling towards it at this point.
And I would say the more so, while the comparison, I would say Shekavat's 1-1 comparison of the big antagonist that's introduced, though, is not necessarily the guy who kidnaps the niece, but his uncle. Pratap
Oh, sure,
Reddy,
sure. Yeah,
who
yeah.
he is kind of the main villain that we're introduced to here.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's on alongside, it cuts between Pushpa and his mission to save his niece, and Siddhartha and his mission to not get killed alongside
Right.
everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And so
these
by the way, these actors who they cast as the villains here are just perfect. They're killing it in the role because I mean, the one guy, the main, and I don't know the actor's name, but
he's a cricket player.
He is like his expression, his facial reactions, the way he kind of he has like a look where he like kind of looks like the camera like that, and like kind of like does like almost like a Pennywise
he's a
thing.
sociopath,
and it's like it's really
and then
good.
seeing him in like the press event, I saw him like sitting behind Allu Arjun, like next to the niece character, and he was like smiling and laughing. I'm like, that's a different guy. I'm like, that is a different man.
So they add, I think, a lot to that like the evilness of that sequence too. But so they kidnap the girl. Pushpa's like, okay, I gotta get her back, and so does. Go ahead, Alexa. You seem
he locks down the whole town. He's like, everyone, none of you are leaving. Nothing's moving. No cars are moving.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting checked. He also, one thing I appreciate was he like rallied all of the university students because she got kidnapped from her class. And so he's like, what were you doing? Like, it's kind of like what he doesn't say that ever, but he's just like all the students, like Kesava makes a call and is like, gather all the university students into, the square or whichever, wherever it was that they met in like the center of town. And then Pushpa gets in a car after going on the news and telling everyone to be scared.
Which what a small detail in that sequence where, like Pushpa's like this and he's like delivering his monologue and like addressing the camera, and they're like, oh, the camera's over here, and he's like, then move it. And so then the camera
says, then move it.
And the camera like moves over there and
again, Kesava being a great character as well, and then them doing it is so spectacular.
I think it shows that again the first movie set the stage. You really get to see that stage here. I think you get a lot more of experience of the outside of the what's happening outside these characters. But so he locks down the city, and he says the very famous line that he's gonna. Alexa, actually, I want you to say it, but I'm gonna introduce it. So he says the line that if you don't give my daughter back, because he considers her his daughter, I will tear you apart. Essentially, is the literal translation. In the subtitles it says like no mercy. But Alexa, what does he say? No, just say his line. This is
Rapu?
Nope, that's not it.
What? No, what is it? Rapa?
There you go.
Rapa.
And then again, you just got to repeat it twice.
Rapa.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Sorry, Rapu is almost tomorrow, but pronounced wrong.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yep, I was wrong in all friends.
So, he says that famous line. It's kind of a core of the next little bit of the movie, because that's kind of all he says for a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
But so he's trying to find where his daughter is. I'll say his niece, but his daughter is. And the guy sees it on the TV, and he's like, "Oh, it's Pushpa." So he calls him and says, "Hey, you gotta be here." In this dingy mountain cave that I reside in.
This place that me and my friends hang out, like just abandoned.
Me and the boys always hang out in the mountain ruins, Alexa. That's what we do. You wouldn't get it. So
I've been to mountain ruins.
Oh, okay. So actually, I will say how he gets there, helicopter. Under the helicopter is that last couch
the
of
one
money
they took from Jolly Reddy,
right? Which I thought was the last one remaining. So he takes that, drops it in, and follows, and then begins this really crazy sequence. Okay, and we're not going to go through details, but essentially the position that Pushpa finds himself in, he's trapped by a bunch of goons. They've dressed him up in kind of similar attire to they've draped him as sari, but it's not kind of the same way as
not
it was.
as full. Yeah, and they've thrown like turmeric on his face,
and he has like bangles and chains.
They
and
put
stuff.
some earrings in,
and essentially they're holding him down, and because they have his niece as a hostage, and so they're going to hurt her if he does anything.
They have a gun to her head in the other room,
and. Well, no, at this point, they bring her out.
Oh, at this point,
they bring her out.
Okay.
I'm setting the stage for what happens. Because then Pushpa essentially goes into like a trance.
And before we get fully into that, is they bring back a character from the first movie that I think adds a lot to this sequence, where he comes in and he's like, who's this here? And the
Oh,
Pushpa's
yes,
not
yeah,
tied
yeah.
up at all. He's just standing there draped in
Yeah.
the sari, and they're all kind of making fun of him. And he's like, what are you doing? Like, he's terrified. He was there at the fight sequence when Pushpa had like a scarf on his face and his
Yeah.
arms were tied behind his back.
Yeah.
And so this guy was there.
Yeah.
And so now he's seeing Pushpa draped and, obviously fuming.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
he's like,
just like stewing. Yeah.
terrified. And so he ties up his arms. He's like, no, we have to all tie his legs. And they're like, why tie up his legs? Like, he's good. And,
then
he's like, no. He's like, as long as he's breathing, you are dead.
Yeah.
And they are taking it
Yeah.
so lightly. And then Pushpa really showcases that
well-
that guy was 100% right.
and it's so, again, this movie is the first one amped up, right?
Mhm.
And so in the first one, they're like, oh yeah, Pushpa is still a threat, even if you tie his hands behind his back.
and
then
put
this
like
one,
a scarf over his face.
yeah, and in this one, they're like, actually, you could tie his legs up too. He's still going. So
Yeah.
it's a cool. I mean, look, I will. It's obviously over the top,
Oh, so over the top.
but it's done like So going into it, he's trapped, he's held down, and then he goes like you can see him like start shaking, and he goes into this trance.
Almost kind of, back to the Jatra festival, kind
Yeah.
of like parallels with that. And yeah, he's in this trance where he just goes crazy.
Absolute-
Rappa, rappa.
Yeah, no, absolutely, just monstrous. And I
Yeah.
think this is one of the few times, in my opinion, that a Mas hero felt terrifying, like where he
Yeah.
was like actually scary for a little bit.
No, I mean, just that first sequence where he, launches himself and just, rips into the guy's neck. They roll off the hill. They just see limbs flailing.
Yeah.
And then he like comes up and
then he
like,
roars, yeah.
the blood splatters from his mouth as he turns his head. And just throughout that sequence, and then looking at it from a more technical perspective as well, the wire work in that
yes.
sequence is insane. There are so many times where I'm like, how did they do that? Like, I'm trying to like analyze it a bit, and I'm just like, the amount of intricate and complicated wire work that went into those shots, and some, again, some longer shots as well, as Sri was talking about,
Mhm.
of like where they had to do multiple wire work like setups with Alu Arjun, and in one shot is honestly just impressive.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a lot of wire work. And he tears through these people in some brutal ways. And again, the
Truly.
movie sets up this stuff and it repeats the stuff. And
Mhm.
I really like, speaking of the sequence from the first movie, you have his point of view in that first movie where like the scarf is over his head and he goes, and then like the
You
scarf
see
blows
like
open.
the feet of the
Yeah.
people, like,
And it's similar here where like he's, like as he's fuming, he like can hear the jingle of the guy's foot, or he can picture this guy's hand and
'Cause
stuff like that. Like
who are the people specifically touching his
niece.
niece/daughter.
Yeah, and then he specifically like those people. He finds them and he like cuts off that dude's foot or cuts off the dude's arm.
And then does Tagirale
Yeah.
with the amputated arm.
Yeah, and like just gnarly, like
Insane.
truly gnarly
And then
stuff.
The one guy even ends
Who
the-
from the go
the
ahead.
first film, who was the one who comes in and kind of really sets up of, you should be terrified right now.
Yeah,
And he's like, him and the
The
new
main villain guy,
antagonist, main villain, are like backing away on the ground, looking horrified, and he
Yeah.
just. He does it. He's like, I'm out. I'm not allowing Pushpa to do whatever he's gonna do to me brutally.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. This world is not mine anymore.
Yeah,
Like-
no, it's a crazy like it's such a weird, again, it shows how terrifying I think that character is
Yeah.
supposed to be, and I think it works for me because it
Mhm.
is the way, and I've seen this discussion a little bit regarding this sequence particularly because
Yeah.
I saw like people going like, oh, it's so over the top. And for me, and it's not just Pushpa that I feel like this way about, but I think Pushpa works really well as an example of it. But
Mm.
I think that Mas movies like this are sort of like are as significant to pop culture in India as maybe like anime is to Japan. It is the way that the way the stories are told. And there's certainly over the top things in each of the things. Each kind of storytelling facet, but for here, this is like. There's some stunning visuals, like I said, and the wire work. While it is crazy, it's really impressive when you just look at it, and it builds this narrative that I think that in the world that is set up in this movie, it all makes sense to me. Like it all works the way I think
agree.
it should. So the whole over the topness of the movie, I think as long as it serves the purpose of the main story arc. and obviously is a little crazy. And there are certainly times where in this movie specifically, I felt that they were like, oh, maybe it was a little too much, like, and it's small things for me. At the end of the movie, right after the sequence we're talking about, he throws actually at the dad of the bad guy. There's the new bad guy. He throws a trident, and the trident, hits the guy, and then it goes up. Like, it pulls him up.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would have been just as impactful if it just, like, hit him and then straight back.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
And he just got pinned to the wall. I think it would have been
Or even, like, hit someone behind him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that would have also worked.
Yeah, and so, and same thing with the Japan sequence. I have a few moments in Japan where I'm like, wow, you could have.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, when he's carrying him up the steps is one of the most significant of those.
Yeah.
And then, or when he's dangling the guy and the guy, like, kicks him. It's like,
and then he
throws him off to the side, like, that whole, like, why would you kick the guy if he's the only thing holding your boss up from falling? Like, that doesn't, and then how the boss was able to hold himself, like,
and there's also, like,
and shooting with a pistol from, like, a million feet away and hitting directly on the person
like a little,
with
one
arm.
Yeah, like a little handgun.
Yeah, not to say no one can do that. There are people in the world who can do that, but it's not a common skill.
It's crazy. Yeah, and then similarly, like, I think in the right after the climax when Shekawat is getting the sandalwood, I think he's using a shotgun because it's a shotgun shell that's ejecting from the gun, but that thing
chunks are just exploding.
Well, but no, I think the idea is that he's hitting the gas, is why they're exploding.
Right.
But shotguns don't have that range. Shotguns are not that, they don't work that way, at least as far as I know. So
we're not gun experts. So,
to
be very clear.
I've just seen Vikram. I think that's my knowledge actually. So there's definitely things that are like maybe a little bit require that suspension of disbelief that we're going back to, but man, this whole ending climax fight sequence I thought was just
in the ending of the climax, like where it officially ends. Like obviously it does cut back and we do see the father of the but the harsh cut of the father coming in and we just see him, and then it hard cuts to the funeral for the Pratap's nephew, and then it pans over to his brother as well, like Pratap Reddy's brother. I think Reddy, right? I'm not sure, his brother, that was such a good reveal. Like I was like, this is spectacular the first time I watched that, and every time I've watched it since, as it's about to happen, I'm like, I just can't help but smile because it's such a fun way to deliver that news in like a horribly terrifying way, but like it's just like such a, like, it's almost comedic, the timing of it, if you take out what it is, that's literally someone being dead, but like the hard cut, like it's a comedic timing is what they utilize to help reveal it, and it makes also it's a nice moment of like levity a little that is needed after such an intense, terrifying sequence. And so I think that it just does a really good job to like take you back into the main story, like in a really harsh way, but works.
No, I thought I really liked the sequence, and so and I can say that while saying that it's over the top. Like it doesn't have to; those aren't like mutually exclusive. Yeah,
and I mean, you talked a bit about how like in Telugu industry from your side, but even from the more like American perspective, which you've been here a long time, so you kind of have your foot in both. But for me, I can speak more just to that, and like Hollywood movies for a long time have been really like, oh, everything has to be real and gritty and like all this. And then we have the superhero movies where things were fantastical. But if it's a real person in a real movie, all the fight, everything needs to be realistic. And I feel like we're starting to move away from that a bit more in Hollywood, where we kind of want the more fantastical and more so like the fight sequence in Pushpa 2. I've been watching Indian films for a while now, so for me it's not as impactful as maybe others who are not as well versed in other countries' movies.
And the zero gravity fight sequences, they're not aware.
But even for me, like this fight sequence in Pushpa, one of my top favorite fight sequences, honestly. And from both just how fun it is to watch and also the impressiveness of the technical feats that they have with the wire work. I really want to see a behind the scenes of that. I would just really love to see that. I'd watch a whole documentary of the behind the scenes of that one fight sequence to see how they do that wire work and the shots and everything around it, the stunt work. Like it's impressive. And so, because like even as you were saying, you're like on Reddit, I think it was, and so like people saw like people from India were like saying how this is too over the top, and then it'd get reposted in some other one like, lol, look at this Indian movie, and the comments were like, it's actually pretty sick. Where can I watch this? Like,
yeah.
And I think it really shows the difference in where the audience are at in the different parts of the world. You know, there's different things that they're craving and different things they want. Telugu films have for a long time, you know, been these mass over the top fight scenes, while American films have been a bit more overall. Like, there's still fantastical movies.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, for
lots
sure.
of movies come out from both industries. I'm saying a blanket statement doesn't have all the nuances, to be clear.
Yeah.
But in America, it's mostly been a lot of, or Hollywood rather, it's been a lot of like, you know, raw, real, gritty. And people kind of want the more just fun time now. Like, you know, we have the Fast and Furious movies that give us that, but like we don't have a lot of examples.
Right. Yeah.
And
That's fair.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm personally. This has been so interesting, as you said, to look at and see the internet's reaction to this versus like people that are like, oh, I can't believe they're doing this on film. I wouldn't call this film at all. So yeah, it's been, and I think maybe a point to say on this. That I'll put a pin in it for it is that I see a lot of people who are maybe cinephiles from India who feel like they can't talk about like or can't be interested in this kind of movies as well, like as if, you know, you can't both like A24 movies and a Moss movie. Which
it's similar here. There's definitely cinephiles in America. Same thing where they're like, I only like indie films. I'm like, Fast and Furious, psh, Marvel, psh. Like you can't enjoy those, or else you're not a true like cinema fan.
But I think that, you know, as a moviegoer, you know, your goal is to be entertained or invested, and there's sometimes you want investment. You want just, okay, I want to be here. I want to see this real story, you know, or I want to, you know, there's different moods and stuff. So you can enjoy one. You can, you know, I'm trying to think of, you know, you can enjoy Civil War or Love Lies Bleeding, or Interstellar, and you can also love a movie like Pushpa 2 and enjoy it, you know, for what it is. You can also love Fast and Furious. You know, Christopher Nolan famously loves Fast and Furious movies. So, you know, you can do both and not feel like, you know, you have to like shit talk your own kind of culture or
and that's one thing I've talked about in previous reviews way back when on this channel, and is like one of the ways that I'll judge a movie and like how whenever I did reviews, especially when I'd like rank them and such, is it's not just on my enjoyment, how much I personally liked the movie. Another factor you have to consider is what was the purpose of this movie, because not all movies are made for me. Not like there's like, I think Chumbag was one of the films that I watched, and like there's also some another example is like Talk to Me was another movie where the movie's great, really good movie. I hated it because I don't like that kind of movie. I just do not enjoy the fear of it and like how it makes me feel. I don't like that. But they were spectacularly well made movies, and I respect them. Yeah. Like, so just because you don't necessarily like a movie doesn't mean it's a bad movie. Right. Now, sometimes those do go hand in hand. Yeah. Like, there are also bad movies that you don't like, but there's nuances. And I think a lot of people push aside those nuances to have what they feel is the correct opinion. And I think that's nonsense, and just enjoy movies. Yeah. And similarly, like, you know, just because, you know, you're saying something is good about a movie, you know, it doesn't mean it's a perfect movie. No. You know, like, we're not saying that there's no flaws. And we can address the flaws while also liking the movie as a whole. Now, that brings us to pretty much the end of the movie, which, again, this movie is so long that the credits are also the movie. So you can't like, oh, you know, it's actually like 3 hours and 40 minutes. No, it's 3 hours, 44 minutes to the dot. Because during the, you know, once the bad guys are dead, you establish one, as Alexa had hinted at earlier, this Legion of Doom of bad guys that they're doing with I love
Pratap Reddy, and then you have Jolly Reddy coming back. Is Mangalam Srinivasan things there, right?
Yeah, he's there. Him and his wife are there.
And so they're all you know, getting together for the funeral, and they get this mysterious package delivered to them with a little skull on it. And then we cut to the wedding sequence. Now, the wedding sequence of the niece has
we've kind of glossed
other
over.
One significant thing in the Reloaded. You go ahead. We can.
Yeah, so we kind of glanced over. So obviously, one of the other through lines of both movies is the fact that Pushpa's family, because his mother was sort of a mistress to his father, his father passed away, and the family does not recognize him, so he does not have a surname, and that's a big
Yeah, I mean, the
thing in this whole
Jatra
movie.
first dance is from that.
It's all around, like, that's a significant thing throughout this entire film and throughout the first film. And so the end of this movie, his elder brother comes and, after he saved his daughter and is saying, like,
I'm a terrible person.
Yeah,
you
I'm
are.
so sorry.
Absolutely.
He is a total piece of shit, for lack of a better word, throughout this. The way he behaves and treats Pushpa is so infuriating, which again, props to the actor, because he has played a wide variety of guys. He's played nice guys, bad guys, all around, and he always kills it. And you hate him in this movie, and just props to him for that. So they have this moment where he invites him to the wedding. He's like, "You are in our family." He gives them the surname on the wedding invites. Their names are listed with the surname.
Yeah, and then this is where you also find out that that they're having a boy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a fun fact.
So, yeah. Do you really?
Yeah, because she says, "Oh, you're missing one name." Oh, you didn't catch this?
I didn't know that meant that it was a boy. I thought they were just gonna name him either way.
No,
I didn't realize. I thought it was like, I was like, oh, because like how a lot of Indian names you'll just name, male and females will get the names.
No, yeah, that's
so I thought that it was just whichever one we get, we're naming it after your dad.
No, yeah.
And it's them either way. I didn't realize that was a full gender reveal. I've seen this movie 3 times.
Yes. So
okay. Well,
that's what you get.
Wow.
and by the way, in that moment, right after he finds out it's a boy, is when Pushpa starts crying.
In that sequence, I mean that performance. Just let me get a little. I can only snap with this hand, so I can't snap with my left hand. So I got to do this, but snaps around for him for that.
But now I guess now for you, you understand why that's more significant, because
fully
he finds out it's a boy, but now he has the name
with
now.
the surname. She says it with the surname.
Yeah,
so yeah, that's incredible.
It means a lot more.
I just felt, my kid will have a surname. I didn't realize that it was a full gender reveal. That was lost on me culturally. Yeah, I think.
Well, there you go. Now, Allu Arjun has a really good performance in this. I think probably best of his performances since Vedam. Just really good
for emotional performance.
For emotional performances. Yeah. Because I think AVPL, he's good at what that is. Like he is Bantu for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then so we go to the wedding. And the cut scene was that
the scene that was cut. It's not a cut scene like a video game.
No. The scene that was cut was that the niece, obviously has the chain that was taken from Pushpa in the first movie, or said in the first movie
when he was a small little baby boy,
a wee little lad, and then so they take that and he puts it back on Pushpa's around his neck, and that kind of completes that arc a little bit. The stuff that was started in the first movie is kind of maybe a little bit set to resolve. And I honestly think, truth be told, if you pause the movie there, you can completely forget that there's another movie coming, guys. No. You can pause the movie and say, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, especially the Reloaded. The Pushpa Japan sequence makes sense.
Pushpa has, it's
he's
done.
He's now happy. He's rich. He's going to retire, give it to Kesava once his kid's born.
Yep, the end.
We're done.
Close the movie, and you're happy. Then, if you keep playing it, though.
If you take the risk.
The camera pans back at the wedding. They also received the package with a flower bouquet with a little skull on it.
And the eyes.
And then we cut to outside the city, this burned-looking hand.
Who could it
be?
We didn't even talk about that. There's so many scenes in this movie that we have not talked about. We can't talk about all of them.
So the hand presses the button and wildfire. It is the movie ends with a cliffhanger on. There was a bomb went off at the wedding.
Pushpa and all of his family. He's just reunited. He just hugged his brothers for the first time in his entire life.
Yep.
And he is here at his, daughter's wedding.
Niece,
he calls her his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this beautiful, happy moment. They're all happy. Like the dad kicked in Servali's belly.
I think for me, by the way, to add to this, it's almost like. I grew up watching Telugu movies and Indian movies in general, and there's this a trope in like kind of maybe 80s, 90s movies where it ends with like a marriage. It's like a classical thing. It's like a final frame of a movie would be usually like rom-coms, but like it's like a.
And they're
final
like about
frame.
to take the photo and everything of like the whole family there, where you think it's gonna be this.
And usually they freeze frame there, and it says like Subam, which is like at the end of the movie, like there's a thank you for watching, whatever, and. It's like almost that, and then the camera kind of like, oh, you thought this was going to happen? Let's pull back. And
it's instead of freeze framing.
And then, so that brings us to Pushpa 3, The Rampage. which we have no idea when that movie's coming out because
2029 it says.
Yeah,
now.
Allu Arjun's working on another movie already for I think with Trivikram.
Exciting.
So, yeah,
AVPL team
looking
back
forward
together.
to seeing him with like regular.
You can see he had a very different vibe in his facial hair and hair at the press event for Pushpa 2. Yeah, the thank you meet. Sorry.
Yeah,
and so. Yeah, you could tell he's a little bit more cleaned up for his next role. Very different than Pushpa Raj, but
yeah,
it'll probably be a nice break for him. I feel like to
and then he gets to go back right into it into Pushpa 3. But I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think. General Alexa, I think you had a prediction that you wanted to make for a long time. I'll let you finally say it.
Well, when I watched the theatrical cut, I thought that the Japan sequence was going to be part of the rampage. I thought it was going to be, and I still think part of this is that Srivali is going to have not made it through the explosion, but their kid will have. But Pushpa will have not, he's not going to meet the kid. It's my prediction.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't, he won't see the kid. And so then he goes on this rampage to destroy the Legion of Doom that's formed.
Yeah.
And,
Shekhavat
and
I wonder,
everyone.
are they also, dead? Because they also get a thing with the...
No, but it
skull,
wasn't,
right?
it was just to show he was there.
Oh, I see.
It didn't have
presence.
the lights. It was just I'm a part of this. He's not there physically because he was off setting off the explosion.
Sure,
but
right.
it's showing that he is a member of the Legion of Doom. And so...
I'm glad that's what we're calling him. Yeah.
We're sticking with. And that's how I felt that was.
Yeah, okay, sure.
And so it's a key difference, the beeping of it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think. It's so his son, he won't even probably see his son. His mom's taking care of it, her mom, all that. And then he goes off and is killing people. And so I thought that was going to be part of the, go to Japan. He's just now brutal killing machine and just anger. Is what fuels him now. Because before it was ego was his fuel.
Yeah.
And then I think this next film, it will be anger is his fuel. Which makes, if you think about the terrifying sequence of this, that was him fueled by, well, that was anger, I would say as well, because they were disrespecting his niece.
What's the real, if this is
if this is the mild,
what's the rampage?
What is the rampage? And so I'm really intrigued to see how they, because they turned it up a lot for this movie. So expectations for the next one
are high.
And so they're going to have to turn it up again.
Yeah, how do you turn it up from here?
I'm
it's gonna be interesting.
Watching that final fight sequence. It's how do you turn it up? Truly.
Now,
and so I'm really intrigued to see.
My one prediction. So Alexa's prediction, if you didn't catch it, is that Srivali will not.
I think she died.
Yeah. So that's.
But his son lives. Clearly.
That's
now I know that it's a son.
For me, I think one thing that I noticed having watched the movie now is that there was a teaser, I think about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that was released for this movie that was called "Where Is Pushpa?" And it was, obviously everyone's like, okay, it's a teaser for Pushpa 2, but after watching Pushpa 2, that stuff is not in the movie at all. There's no context for that. And so I think it's actually a teaser for Pushpa 3 because from my understanding, and again, this is clearly, with the review's over, we're just hypothesizing here. But it seems like after the explosion or whatever, Pushpa's missing, or Pushpa goes to jail after or something like that. Because I believe it's in the thing, in the
says
news
he
recording.
Escaped.
It says he escaped, and but there's riots going on in the streets. There's a wildlife footage of him just in the forest with a tiger, and it's and then the public's like, oh, Pushpa's alive. So that's something.
Yeah, and he got shot a bunch of times in that sequence, right?
20 something.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous.
Yeah, so I'm really curious to see if that actually is a teaser for Pushpa 3, I think, or just what that means otherwise.
And I do have to say one final review thought of Pushpa 2 is knowing that it's only a second movie, not the final one. Also, I think impacts reviewing because I kept wondering, how, with the first time watching it, I'm like, how are they going to finish this arc? I'm like, it seems like they're just adding more and more.
It's like watching, it's like watching an anime. Again, it's like watching an anime where this arc doesn't make sense. This can't end.
It's because there's 40 more seasons. But then in this, it's there's
I'm watching One Piece. I forgot,
And then for this one, though, it's there's going to be another movie. And so whenever that title card came out at the end, I was like, okay, there has to be. They've set up way too much. But for the good chunk of the film, and part way in, I was like, okay, there has to be a third one. I figured it out because I'm like, there has to be, because there's no way they could conclude it. But still, part of my brain, even as thinking, I was like, if they did, though, how would they? How would they?
Well, what if they did?
And trying to
see, that was spoiled for me at this. Before I even went to watch it the first time, I had already found out that there was a part 3. The title card was revealed or whatever.
Right, someone had posted it.
So I was already So I already had that context. I didn't have a viewing where I was like, how did they try to figure this?
Because I think that could also be some people people's complaints, so those first viewers who didn't have that spoiled, because there was like some initial, controversy was right away with this film.
Obviously, yeah, sure. Right.
And so
there's
people were like,
yeah.
nothing happens. Like, as a lot of people said, the plot was weak, and it's like, well, this is a middle movie. So the movie is to bridge the gap between the first and the second one. So
yeah,
like you have to kind of, you have to know that about the plot. Well, the plot, I think it's a very strong plot. We could make a whole other video where we break down the parts of the plot, and I show you all of it. I think we went through a lot
of the plot here.
We did. We didn't do it as formalized as that, though. Like, you can, all the parts that make up a plot, and I can give you multiple examples for each part throughout the movie, because it has like
climax,
2 of them.
Resolution,
like first half and second half. Yep. And then one huge overarching one as well. We won't do that now, but if you guys want it, let me know. And then,
with a whiteboard, we'll get Alexa a whiteboard.
There you go. I'll go crazy off VR, and I'll just like make a murder board of Pushpa's plot. But you have to just kind of give it that knowledge of this is a middle movie. Yeah. Nothing is getting resolved. And you have to know that. Because it definitely, it leaves you like, again, I want more. And so, well, I like that feeling to an extent. I would like it better if, the movie was coming out next year or something. Away. Yeah, not but, I still, appreciate that. And so just something to keep in mind when you're watching the movie, that there is a third one and this is a middle movie.
Yeah. And actually, one final note, to wrap up my thoughts as well, that we just could not fit into the main discussion here, is the music is really awesome.
Oh, yeah.
There's some really, like, so this is DSP has done the songs here as well as select kind of sequences, and then Sam CS, who I'm most familiar with from his work on Kaiti. He
great movie.
Does a lot of the other stuff, and it is a really like some of the like soundtrack and the vocalizations in it are really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And
really
I think
well mixed.
Overall, the mixing of this movie is just like above the first one by a long shot, in my opinion.
Yeah, the background music too, even not just the song specifically.
Yeah.
Which I think you were referring to all of it. It's really impactful. And there are ones you told me is from Kaiti. There is one sequence where Pushpa, like, they're literally in trucks, and I was like, I can hear it. I was like, I can hear it. I can hear like
right after
kin
intermission.
to it. It's different. It's still unique, but you can hear. I'm like, oh, it is the guy who did Kaiti, huh?
Yeah. So all around though, we enjoyed the movie. This is not something, we're not going to score it. I think we've talked about it for over an hour at this point. I think I'm not even sure.
I don't know how long it's been. Should have put a timer.
we thank you guys for sticking it through to the end. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. If you want to see more stuff like this, obviously we'll have to have a movie that we just feel we have this much to talk about, but we take notes often. So if you want us to dive into a certain movie like this in the future, let us know, and we'll give it a watch.
See what we can do.
Yeah. But with that said, as always, people, check out Pushpa 2. The Rule. This is not sponsored. We just want.
No, I wish.
No, yeah.
Yeah. And here's for how big this movie was. I think we can briefly just say at the local Regal Cinema, we were able to buy the popcorn bucket for Pushpa 2, which this is the first time I've seen one for an international film.
Yeah.
And also a cup, which we do not have here, but it just has it's an image from the promo from Srivali of Rashmika and Alu Arjun. It's a very lazily made cup, but we did buy it because we'd never seen an Indian film get their own cut things.
And being Pushpa 2 was a nice touch too. So
we really loved the movie, so we were like, yep, we're getting this. So with all that said, overall, we enjoyed Pushpa 2. Again, it's not perfect, but we had a fun time with it. Just like we hope that you had a fun time with this video here. And if you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to see a bit more about what kinds of content to expect and our plans for the future of the channel, make sure to check out our reboot video that we just released, linked in the description below. And as always, I hope you have a good night,
a good morning,
and just a damn good time. Bye.